Hello and welcome to Straight Shooting with Dan and Joseph. Tune into this podcast to get the latest news on competitive shooting events and to learn how to become a better shooter. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and be sure to recommend it to all of your shooting friends. Welcome to everyone with Straight Shooting with Dan and Joseph. I'm Dan Killough along here with Joseph Stacker. Please remember to go on Facebook and Instagram and like us and follow us for Eley, Killough Shooting Sports. My personal Instagram is Shooting Accuracy and Joseph's is PS Photog. Previewing today's show, we're going to have a few score updates, what matches have been able to operate, and going to go over some USPSA update from Joseph, I guess, on your match in Austin. We have our Straight Shooting Challenge where we went out yesterday and did a JJ Racaza drill. I believe that's the one we're doing this time. And then we're going to come in and talk a little bit about barrels. We're going to have Paul Tolvstad on with us. Works with us here at Killough Shooting Sports and has some extensive barrel knowledge, has worked for a couple of different barrel manufacturers and done that for a while. Then we've got Bleeding Off with Joseph, where we're going to talk about no mics, no misses, no penalties, and how crucial that is to your overall score.
Very few anyway.
That's right.
Maybe not no, but.
All right, moving on to some match updates here. IR 50-50, they are still having a match March 21 through 22, Piney Hill Indoor in Luray, Virginia. Sporter Nationals followed by the Three Gun Nationals. That match is still a go. ARA 22 Rimfire Bench Rest indoor match March 14th in Frog Level. They had their club tournament. Bill Drummond was third, Richard Morgan was second, and Jerry Smith won that. Don't forget, ARA is going to have the factory rifle giveaway after the first quarter. We've got a Savage rifle with a Citron scope and 500 rounds of Eley Precision that will be given away. And the way to get in on that raffle is to compete in an ARA sanctioned factory match. Every target you complete will get you one entry into the drawing. So be sure and go on to AmericanRimfire.com. Find an ARA match that's in your area that's still going on and participate in a factory match, and we'll do that. And we're going to give away one each quarter. So we're going to do the first one April 7th, I believe it is. 8th, we'll have the drawing once we get all the scores in for the first 3 months of the year. Other ARA matches coming up right now. It is still a go on March 28th and 29th for the Chickenfoot Indoor Club Tournament in Cedartown, Georgia. That'll be a club tournament as well as a Georgia State tournament to finish out the indoor season for this year, and that is a go. Cedartown, Georgia, as of today. Look for updates on that. If there is a change to that, it will be changed on Monday. But look at AmericanRimfire.com for any other match updates on that. NRL 22, the March 28th Eley Rocky Mountain NRL 22 regional match at North Springs Shooting Range in Price, Utah has been postponed. Working on a date to come up with that, and we'll get back to you with that. But definitely going to have that match. Just trying to figure out if it's going to be June or July. Working towards that. Jim Cannon, that's been instrumental in that, it's got a new baby on the way. Have the NRL 22 national match in May, yep. So trying to get everything scheduled around so that we don't step on anything and go from there. All right, USPSA updates. How'd it go you went to Austin, correct?
Yeah, it was a little local match that they have there. It's a really good match. It was kind of rainy that day, but they didn't have any issues really with the course or anything. I didn't do very well in particular. Just it was kind of a learning match for me. Not so much with shooting or working on anything like that. Mostly with products that I use with cleaning and maintenance of the gun. Found out some things about that I hadn't thought about previously. It was kind of cold that morning, and the oil or the lube that I use on the slide got kind of gummed up because of the temperatures. It was kind of chilly, and so had some issues there, so I had to address that, but I've got it figured out now, so just another learning match for me. Shot okay. Should have done really well. It was a really good match. It kind of suited me, but just had some issues with the gun that they were my fault, but I know what they are now, so they've got them fixed. So learned the hard way that way, but it was a really good match. They've got local matches there once a month at a couple different ranges. They have them there at the range. It's just called the Range in Austin. I think it's kind of pretty central Austin. This one was in Manor, but it's a really good range. It was a great match. Kind of a learning experience for me, unfortunately.
All right. Well, that's what you got to do. What did Blake say? Win or learn?
Yeah, you either win or you learn.
Hopefully you learn.
So it's
if you lose and don't learn, then why in the world did you go?
Yeah, it's a lot of learning.
All right, very good. Moving along to straight shooting challenge. Give them a little update on what we did yesterday there, Joseph.
It was not necessarily a challenge. It was more of a drill. But it's something that's been circulating online that a lot of guys are doing. It's nothing new. It's basically called a bill drill, where you shoot 3 rounds after your draw. You're still on a buzzer. You keep track of your time and everything. So you draw, shoot 3 at the same target, mandatory reload, shoot 3 more. Kind of recirculated from JJ Ricazza, and so he got a bunch of people doing it, so we just hopped on board and saw how we could do it. The only thing different is we're using our 22 pistols instead of open guns, but
yeah. So this is a USPSA style drill, to where typically you would do it with your USPSA gun, but we've got a couple of that Kurt Grimes has built for us, 22 pistols that are pretty close replicas of what we use in open
guns. They're just calibered in 22.
That's right. They've got a Caspian frame with a Taxol conversion on them, and just like pulling out your 2011 there and blasting away. It's a lot of fun. Not near the muzzle flip.
And it's really cheap.
We use some Eley Force in ours. Works really good. Accurate. Seems to cycle every single time. Keeps the gun pretty clean. And the holes in the paper are a lot smaller.
Minuscule.
But it's a lot of fun. Good way to get some training in and whatnot. If you've got a smaller area or something and maybe can't do 38 cal or because of noise or for whatever various reasons, if you're able to get set up like this, it sure is a lot of fun. You can get a lot of shots in without getting beat down too bad.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more price effective too. So check that out. We've got that. You've got that posted on YouTube?
Yes. Well, it will be whenever this goes up.
All right, very good. So get on there. We've got our times on it. Joseph's are a lot better than mine. I obviously look like a beginner because I am a beginner. It's a little bit different on the mag change with the 2.2.
Those little skinny mags, and the mag well is not quite as big, so it's a little more difficult. You got to be a lot more precise whenever you put that mag in there. But other than that, it's almost a clone, just a little smaller frame.
So go on there, video yourself, give us your times on what you're doing. JJ likes to do it in 2.5 seconds. We're not anywhere near 2.5 seconds, but I suspect most people in the country are not anywhere near 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, most of those guys are really, really good shooters, and there are some. Ours would probably be faster. There are some differences with those pistols that we're using, as far as the size and the way that they sit in the holster. So that's just something that we kind of worked through. But if you think that you have a good time, or if you can do it in that 2.5 seconds, or just beat our times, then let's see it. I'd like to see it, or what you're using to do that.
All right, very good. Go to the YouTube channel there for Straight Shooting with Dan and Joseph. Check that out. All right, moving right along to Precision Shots, brought to you by Killough Shooting Sports, your one-stop shop for competition shooting needs. And to reiterate, we do have plenty of ammunition. If you're looking for ammo and it's sold off the shelf, go to KillowShootingSports.com. We do have some in stock, 38 Super Comp, as well as 2.2 and all the different Eley varieties. We have plenty of it. Get on there. We can get UPS to bring it right there straight to you.
Yeah, we have it. There's no shortage for us. I mean, we've got target ammo for plinking. We have easily cyclable ammo to run through a pistol or a repeater rifle, either one. If you want competition ammo, if you're sitting at home, nothing to do, and you want to do some shooting, then we've got whatever you could ever need.
All right, very good. Today we're going to talk about barrels and everything that goes into barrels. I'm going to call up Paul on the phone. We're going to have our first phone interview on here. We'll see how this goes. I think it'll go well as we get Paul coming in here on the phone. Give him a call at work. Oh,
the call cannot be completed.
That figures. Let me give that another try here.
Give him a heads up, and he still doesn't answer.
Well, it comes up. There we go. Now we get it.
Hello.
All right, we got you. First time we called you, we got the perm, perm, perm. The call cannot be completed as dialed. All right, today we've got on the phone Paul Tolvstad, works with us at Killough Shooting Sports, lives in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. But if you call into our main number, Paul's more than likely going to be the one to answer the phone. But Paul has some extensive knowledge with barrels, has worked for a couple different barrel manufacturers. And so today we're going to talk about mainly rimfire barrels, but we'll cover a little bit on centerfire barrels as well. Paul, tell everybody about your experiences in the different barrel makers you have actually worked for.
I worked originally, the first barrel maker I worked for was Broughton Barrels for Tim North, and I think that started around 2002, 2003. I worked for him, and then after I worked for him, I went down and worked for Rock Creek Barrels for Mike Rock and Kim Tyler. And I worked there, started there in like 2006, and worked there all the way until I started working for you in about, was it 2014 or 15, I guess. And then Dan Muller was actually the one that got me into barrel making. He helped Tim North start Broughton. He asked me if I was actually running a gun shop in Lemira, Wisconsin for years, and Dan was a good customer of mine and asked me if I wanted to make rifle barrels instead of spending all my nights and weekends at the gun shop. So I started that with him, and then we also worked at Rock Creek Barrels with him, and now I help him with the Muller Works barrels.
All right, very good. So we mainly talk about rimfire barrels, but I mean, I know a lot of this will apply to centerfire barrels, but tell us a little bit about what the difference is between. So you hear, I'll tell you what, let's start off. Tell us how do you make a barrel? When it comes in as just a round bar of steel. Am I correct?
Yep, long. Yeah, they're about, I think, 12 to 14 foot long, round stock, and then just comes in, and typically they'll get cut into 27, 28 to, anywhere up to 32 inch, sometimes even 34 inch pieces. But typically for what we do, it'll be a 27 or 28 inch blank.
How big is the steel? I mean, what's the diameter?
Yeah, most of the centerfire stuff is an inch 250 in diameter, or inch 267. But that goes all the way up to an inch and a half, depending on what it is. Like 50 cal stuff, stuff like that. We've even done stuff that's inch and 2 inches, inch and 3/4 in diameter. But most of your centerfire stuff is at inch 250, inch 267, and then rimfire stuff, typically when it comes in, it's an inch 032 or just a straight inch in diameter, and then has to be turned and contoured from there. But
okay.
Typically it comes in, we cut it into lengths, and then take it over onto the lathe and face it, so it's square, and then put a chamfer on it, and then depending on what you're doing, sometimes it'll go into a heat treat oven right away after that's done, and then it gets drilled with the gun drill, and then to a certain size, let's say like a 22 will get drilled to 211, and then it'll get reamed. So you ream that drilled hole, and typically, depending on what you're doing, if it's button or cut or size of your buttons, it'll be anywhere, the ream hole will be anywhere from 216 to 217 typically.
So what does that drill machine look like? I mean, are we talking? I mean, it's not a drill press. It's not a.
No, it doesn't look like a normal drill. Yeah, it's a real long, skinny tube that's kind of like a V-shaped tube, and then so oil gets forced through that tube, and then as the chips are being cut, the oil flushes those chips through the V part of it, and then it comes back out through the back side of the drill, into out a chute and then down into the bottom of the drill into where it catches the drill shavings, and then all the oil. So then the drill stuff sits there, and then all the oil drains back into the tank.
Okay, and how big a machine is this? I mean, because this is the Pratt and Whitney machines?
The old, yeah, mostly these are all old Pratt Whitney machines, yeah, and they're quite big. I don't know. I mean,
some of them are 10 or 12 foot long, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Even the big ones that like they did, we had one that they did like cannon barrels, and sometimes even like the ship barrel. I mean, those things are like the size of a building. They're gigantic.
Right, but these are the good. I mean, a lot of these machines were made in the 30s, 40s, or 50s. Am I correct?
Yeah. These are World War One, World War II, machines.
It's just quite impressive when I have seen these. And another thing that kind of is me being a layman coming in, messing around in my shop and whatnot. I mean, I think about anytime you have a drill, you've got something that's turning the bit, and then whatever you're drilling stays stationary. But a lot of these I've seen that it's vice versa, and that the actual bit or reamer stays still and the barrel is turning.
Yep, right. So when it's drilled, the barrel spins, and then the drill's stationary. And then some of them have a counter rotator where the barrel's spinning, and then that's turning the opposite way to try to keep it straight, when you drill. But the sharpening of the drill is the key thing. To get a straight hole, that tip of that drill, which is carbide, has to be sharpened perfectly. Otherwise, it'll wander, as it's being drilled.
So you drill it and get
it. It's quite an art actually to sharpen one of those drills.
Okay, so you're going to drill it and get it reasonably close, and then the reamer is just a more precise way to do it to get.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, makes a nice round hole with the reamer. Correct.
So what machine are they doing it with the reamer? Is it on the same type of machine?
Well, no, that's the thing. Reamers are several different ways to ream. Pratt Whitney did make reamers. We had one of those when I was at Rock Creek. Dan Muller has a CNC reamer that he made himself. And then the reamer like we used at Broughton, which a lot of places use, is just a lathe. I mean, it was just a closing lathe that that we hooked up and then had an oil system on it, and that's how we reamed, was on just a lathe. I mean, a lot of places do that, so it's not that can be done a ton of different ways. And then actually I've seen some where on the old Pratt Whitney drills, they set up one side was a drill, and then the other side they used a ream. So there's a lot of different ways you can ream for reaming. And then some places are honing. They don't ream them; they hone the hole. So, but they'll do that after the ream. They'll hone instead of pre-lapping the blank. They'll actually hone it after the ream.
Okay. All right. So you've drilled it, you reamed it, and then you say you'll pre-lap it.
You pre-lap it or hone it, right? Yeah.
Okay. So lapping. All right. So let's talk a little bit about lapping for those that don't understand. What does that lapping process look like? And I mean, how do you make a lap? How do you do a lap? Describe it to somebody who first time they ever heard it.
So basically, you take a cleaning rod and then grind it to a point, and then grind little notches onto that point that holds the lead onto that rod, and then behind that point, some places wrap string around the rod. We use like blue painter's tape. You wrap that around the rod, and that stops the when you pour the lead into the barrel, it stops the lead from going down the barrel, so it makes a nice clean lap.
Okay.
And then when you lap,
so you've got
the lead
rod
that you're using is a pure lead. You need to have pure lead. You don't want to use any lead with any type of like any additive to it. You want it to be pure lead.
Okay. So you're gonna pour melted lead into the barrel, and then that way, as it hardens, it's forming a perfect shape.
Forms to the shape of the barrel.
And it's also formed.
But on the pre-lap, it just forms to the round inside of the blank, and that's what you want. You want a good ream because you don't want to spend a lot of time pre-lapping, because you want that hole to be as perfectly round as possible. So that pre-lapped hole, you want that pre-lapped hole or honed hole to be as perfectly round as you can get it.
Okay, so you've poured the lead in there, and it's also around your cleaning rod. That way that you can move that
Right.
lead
Correct.
back and forth.
Yes.
So you're going to pull it out then, and then put it in some type of lapping compound?
Right. Then we push it out the end, add lapping compound, and then usually typically most people put it under power, so put it like in a lathe, and the barrel spins, and then you just pull the lap back and forth through the barrel, and that removes the, kind of like, think about like honing a cylinder on a, like an engine or something. You want that to,
Okay.
you're kind of honing that barrel to get the reamer marks out of it.
So you're lining the inside of it with lead, essentially.
Yeah, for a short segment,
Yeah.
and then you push that out.
Yeah, it's about, the lead laps typically, I mean, it's not crucial, but 3, 4, 5 inches long, typically.
Okay. And then you're going to push that out, put lapping compound on it, which is basically some type of liquid sandpaper, essentially, with various grits. I mean, you're using, you're not using like 30 grit, but I mean, you're using some finer stuff.
No, right. Yeah, mostly it's just aluminum oxide mixed with some type of grease, or then some people use clover.
Okay. But that's kind of, isn't that kind of the ancient Chinese secret for each barrel maker, that they all have their own little special recipe?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it just depends on what everybody kind of probably uses, generally in that same grit size for lapping, but everybody's got their own little thing. It's kind of one of those things that's kind of particular probably to each barrel maker.
Okay. All right. So now you pre-lap it, which is not a whole lot of lapping, just enough, like you said.
No, just removes the to remove the reamer marks. Yep.
Okay. All right. What do you do after that?
So then it gets pre-lapped, and then it'll get cleaned, like super clean, and then we take it over, and then typically places either use some type of grease or lube or like a soap with a copper plate, and then they'll pour that down. It gets applied to the inner part of the barrel, and then it'll get taken over to the button puller, and then just pull the button.
Okay. All right. Tell us a little bit. So now we're talking about pulling a button. So this is where you get to the difference between a button rifle barrel versus a cut rifle barrel.
A cut rifle.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So tell us the difference between a button rifle and cut rifle.
Yeah. So then the button rifle, you pull the button, get done with that, and again you'll go over and you'll clean it out, super clean, get it really clean, and then typically after buttoning you'll have to put it in the heat treat oven. So that gets put in the heat treat oven to go through the heat treat cycle to remove stress from the buttoning process.
Okay.
Versus a cut rifle barrel where you typically won't have to do that. Cut rifle barrel just comes in, it gets drilled, reamed, pre-lapped, gets cut rifled, gets final lap. Depends on what they do. Some people final lap it, then contour it. Some people contour it, then final lap it, which typically is what you would do. I mean, that's the right process, is to cut rifle it, then contour it, then final lap it.
Okay.
And then it can go out the door. Versus with the button rifling, where you have to probably do 2 heat treats, on a button barrel, versus not really having. If the steel comes in from the steel manufacturer and it's made correctly, as a cut rifle barrel maker, you wouldn't have to do that, but sometimes you do have to heat treat them.
So a button rifle, you're going to pull the button down the barrel, and it's going to push or force that barrel into the shape of that button, correct? On the internal.
Yep.
What is that button made out of?
It's a carbide button.
It's a carbide button.
It's a coated carbide button.
And then, so let's say you're making a 4-groove barrel. This button is going to be shaped with those 4 grooves cut out of it.
Basically a button for just regular terms looks like a football, basically. So on the like where you would grip the football where the seams are, that's kind of the like the very biggest diameter of the that's kind of where the little grooves are cut into the button.
Okay.
On that part. So then the groove will actually be kind of cut in there, and then have like a helix. It'll be to what the twist rate would be. So some people turn the barrel and then just pull the button, turn the barrel, depending if they're pushing or pulling it. Some people turn the button rod. So it's done different ways. Like you said, some people push button, some people pull button. There's different ways of buttoning, but basically that button looks the same. It's kind of, for layman terms, it kind of looks like a football with like that sharp with the tip, flat, basically.
So you're going to pull that through there, and then whichever way you do it, that's also where you're going to introduce, of course, the twist rate, meaning
Right. Correct.
how many. So like a 1 in 16 twist means the bullet turns 1 revolution as it goes
In
16 inches in the barrel.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So now the buttons, do they need to be sharpened and resharpened, or they just how long
No.
do they? How does that work?
They're good for a long time.
Okay.
You can pull a lot of, you can make a lot of barrels with one button.
Okay. Now, do most places make their own buttons in house, or is that something you order in?
Yeah, some of the barrel makers do make their own buttons. Some people order them in. There's different manufacturers that make buttons, so yeah, it's done both ways. Some grind their own buttons. Some order buttons from a company.
Okay. So you've heat treated the barrel, and that softens the metal somewhat so that you can do this, because again, the button doesn't cut metal, it's just pushing it and forcing it
places it right. Yep.
in there, as opposed to a cut rifle barrel, which now what is a cut rifle? What does that look like when they actually do that to cut the rifling in there?
Yeah, so there's a round head on the end of a rod, and it's probably, I don't know, 6 inches long or so, 6-8 inches long. And there's an oval shaped pocket where there's a cutter inserted into it, and on the end of that there's like a threaded piece that's on the very tip of the end of the rifling head. So as the head's pulled through the barrel, it's cutting it, then it comes back, and then the barrel turns, and then it cuts the next groove, goes back, and it takes probably about a half an hour to cut one barrel. And after, let's say if you're cutting a 4 groove, after the 4th cut, it comes out, and then it hits a pocket, and it rotates it a little bit, so it raises the hook a little bit. So then it cuts the next, so it just heightens the cutter till it gets to the size where it needs to be.
Okay, but it's going to cut each
so
rifle
that's the
pattern
process.
one at a time.
Yes, cuts each groove one at a time, and then let's say it took a half an hour, let's just say, for a 4 groove barrel. Well, it's going to take an hour for an 8 groove barrel.
Okay.
So on the button, is there a difference, or would it make any difference, like the depth in which it grooves, like
Yes.
how deep your grooves go,
Yep.
or how wide they are?
Yeah, so typically a lot of places have different sizes to those buttons. So like the problem with when you're a button maker is every lot of steel that comes in reacts differently to your button.
Mm.
So you'll have, like, say if I have a 4 MI, like a Muller 4 MI barrel, I'll have 3 different sizes of that button. So when I get steel in, I can pull it to see what it's making. So what it does is when you pull that button, it comes out to a certain size, and when you put it in the heat treat oven, it actually springs back about a half a thousandth. So every time you get new lots of steel in, you have to try it to see what size it's going to come out to be. You have to adjust to what button you're using, or what ream size. You'll ream to a different size to figure out what size it comes out, right? So that's the one thing with button barrels, is you got to be able to figure out what size button and what size ream holes you need to use with different lots of steel and different size steel. Like an inch 250 blank will spring back more than an inch diameter blank.
Right. Is that something that is kind of trial and error, or is that comes with experience?
Yeah, trial. Well, yeah, I mean, at first it's trial and error, then kind of after you've done it a while, you'll just be like, okay, it's probably going to be this, Well, I mean, you just kind of get it figured. But yeah, it's definitely one of the trials of being a barrel maker, is having to deal with that. But like I said, after the company's been doing it a while, they pretty much just know,
Right.
what it's going to be.
Okay. So you're
But
going
for somebody that was going to start a new company, it would definitely be
That's
definitely a
something-
trial
yeah,
and error period.
You'd have
Yeah,
to figure
yeah.
that out before you could have any
Yep.
success, probably.
So how many times do you just pull that button once?
Yes, typically just once. Yep.
I mean,
Some people have a button. It's a button, and then there's a trailer ball that's built into that button. So when it comes, so you'll pull the button, and that trailer ball comes along and flattens the top of the land out.
Okay.
Some people pull a button, and then they'll actually have a separate trailer ball that that all different sizes, and you can get your bore dimension to the size that you want it by pulling that.
Okay.
Some companies use trailer balls, some companies don't use trailer balls. It's just kind of different. Each company's different that way.
Okay. So is it any different on chrome moly versus stainless steel barrels?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. Stainless steel, you need special lube to button it. It's quite a bit of different process. Chrome moly, typically you can just pull it with just regular old hardware store grease.
Okay.
So
okay.
that is the one thing about chrome moly; it doesn't gall like stainless does. So you can, and that's why a lot of people ask well, what's the difference between a $60 barrel and a $300 barrel? Well, typically, on those cheap, let's say AR 1022 barrels, if they're chrome moly, they're just drilled, reamed. They put some grease on a button and boom, pull it down, out it goes. They don't heat treat it. They don't do nothing. It's just drilled, reamed, button, done. And then whatever company they contour it, do whatever they do. They don't go through all that process. So that's kind of the difference in different barrels like that is just the process that's gone through to be able to make the barrel. So.
Okay.
And thus the difference in price range in those button barrels.
All right. Now, what on the stainless steel? What do you know? What steel that typically is?
It's 416R typically.
416R. Okay. We get that question
and then
quite a bit.
Chrome moly is usually 4140 chrome moly.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you've done all this. You've most of rimfire barrels that we typically use and see in the bench rest world are button rifled.
Yeah.
So after you've pulled that button, now what's the process? What are you going to do now?
So pull the button, put it in the heat treat oven.
To make it harder again?
No, to remove stress from the buttoning process.
Okay, that's right, because you forced that. So the
we've
outside
induced
dimension,
stress into the barrel.
Yeah, basically meaning the outside diameter hadn't changed, but you drug something down the middle of it and forced steel out against it.
So now, whenever you heat treat it, you're expanding that back inwards.
Yes. Now, when you heat treat it, right, the internal dimensions will spring back during heat treat.
Okay. All right. So you're going to now tell us about the heat treat. What does that look like?
It's most companies just use a round pottery type oven. So it's usually, I don't know how wide and it's just a big round,
just like an
barrel
like
type
an industrial oven.
Big round.
I think you can have multiple industries that'll use the same oven, even though they're not making anything close to the same product.
Yeah, right, correct. Yep. So then there's a rack in there, and then the barrels get set into that rack.
Are they put into any kind of liquid or anything?
No, they're just put in there. Yep, just air, and then it'll get put in the heat treat oven. Then it typically ramps up to a certain temperature over a 4 or 5 hour period. Then holds that temperature for 4 or 5 hours, and then ramps. Then it shuts off, and then it'll just let it cool off. So let's say at the end of the day, let's say I quit at 5 o'clock. You put the barrels in the heat treat oven, turn on the heat treat oven, and by the next morning you come in, you should be able to open sometime that morning you should be able to open the lid on it and just let them cool the rest of the way. But typically you don't want to open that. Typically don't open that lid or do anything till they're down to about 100 degrees or less.
Is it possible to over-treat one?
Yes, you can overheat treat them, and then it'll actually soften them. It'll actually draw it back. So yeah, you don't want to do that.
If you do that, would it be an option to just rebutton it? Which I know you said you typically only want to run that through once.
Yeah.
But in my mind, theoretically, if I'm boring something out, but there's a process to close that gap then
yeah, you can be buttoned twice.
Okay.
It's just tricky to get it lined up correctly the second time.
Yeah.
Just
like
anything.
It takes some touch to do it twice.
So about how hot are these things getting up to in the heat treat?
Somewhere over 1,000 degrees.
Okay, so pretty dang hot. Pretty darn hot. All right, so now you've heat treated it. Now what do you do?
So it's heat treated, then it comes, pull them out of the heat treat oven, take them over to the contour lathe, Most of what we do, just let's say I've got a 1-inch blank, I take it over to the contour lathe, turn it down to 900 straight, take it into the other room and put it in a cradle and then sand the outside to get all the machine marks off it and stick it in a sleeve and it's ready to ship. Well, not ready to ship, but ready to be final lapped, right, and then ship.
Okay, so so the final lapping on our, so what's a standard off the shelf final lap look like on a barrel? I mean, for not for one of our taper lap, but just a typical final lap. Or do you
as
have
far
one?
as
Yeah, I mean, so you're going to do that and do just a quick lap on every barrel that you finish up. Is that correct? Even a center fire?
Yeah. So center fire barrels typically you want to typically you take a center fire barrel and put about 1/10 of choke into a center fire barrel, so there's not as much lapping involved in center fire barrels versus the rim fire barrel where you're putting 2 to 3 10,000 taper into them, and then you want that taper to be a real very gradual taper from breech to muzzle. So that's where it takes a lot of years of learning and
Right. Okay.
to teach to know how to do that.
Okay. So for those that aren't involved in rim fire, the trick has seemed to be to get one to be very accurate is to have a tapered bore in a barrel. Essentially,
Right.
and Paul, you correct me if I say this wrong, but we're shooting a lead bullet. So the lead is going to squeeze down to whatever size the barrel squeezes it down to. Now, if it's smallest for instance, if it's smallest in the center of the barrel, the lead is going to squeeze down to that size. But then if the barrel gets slightly bigger, now the lead bullet is just kind of rattling around in there.
It has room to play.
Right, for a better term, basically that's what you would say, right.
I'm trying,
it would get forced down to its smallest size, and then if it got bigger, then it would, just like you said, which would kill accuracy.
Exactly. So what you want is it to, from the chamber end to the muzzle end, you want it to get slightly smaller as it goes.
Right.
And that be gradual.
I mean, worst case scenario, you would want it to be just even would be worst case. You just don't want it to be bigger, than what the breech end is. So, but typically you'd want some type of taper
and
to it.
And you want the absolute tightest spot at the muzzle.
At the muzzle, right? Yep.
So that's why a lot of people say, how do gunsmiths? We get people call in that want a gun and say, all right, I want it 24 inches long barrel. And typically, what's our response to that?
Typically, it's like it'll be to whatever the tightest spot is. Yeah.
If you want it accurate,
which you can do it because you can cut more off the breech end, which is nice with a 900 straight barrel. You can cut more off the back end to get it to that length,
right.
Or more. You know what I mean? So you can adjust it that way. Whereas with like a contoured, if you have like a contoured barrel, you're limited to what you can do as far as taking as much off the back end as you need.
Yes.
So that is what's nice about the straight tapered barrels is you can adjust that length to wherever you want it, kind of by how much you take off one end or the other. Where is with a something that's got a tape, a contour to it, you only got a few inches at the back end that you can play with.
So most gunsmiths that do rimfire bench rest, what they'll do is they'll pull a bullet from a 22 round. Have the way we do it here is we'll just have that barrel in a vise just to hold it, and tap the bullet into the muzzle end, get it in there, and then we've got a rod that essentially looks like a cleaning rod that will push against it, and then you push that slug, or bullet, you push that slug down the barrel, and you're feeling for that thing to get tighter or looser, and hopefully it's just you're gonna feel it gradually be tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And what they'll do is they'll measure that on finding the tightest spot and mark it, and that's where you want to cut the muzzle.
Yeah, and that's what they showed us at Shilling, wasn't it, last year? Because they have that. It's like a pressure gauge almost.
Yeah, they air gauge them.
An air gauge. Yeah.
And that's one way you can do it there. The easy way, or I say the easy way, the cheap way to do it is like what you say,
feel it.
But there again, that takes experience.
Yeah.
That's where the art side of things come in. and what you found and done, and why rimfire bench rest gunsmiths might be a little bit different than your average guy doing some stuff. So it
Right.
anyway,
Yeah, I mean,
that's some experience.
I've talked to, one of the top gunsmiths. He's, did a barrel not that long ago. I mean, he spent almost an hour slugging that barrel to find exactly where he wanted to cut it off at. So push the slug from the breech to the muzzle, and then take a slug and push it back from the muzzle towards the breech, and then push it, and try to find exactly where that spot is. Read the taper. They'll measure different places down the barrel and push that slug back out, measure it, push it back in, measure it. So, yeah, it can be quite a process to get that where they want it.
And that's also why a lot of people, when they say, "Oh, well, I've got a 24-inch, man, I really want an 18-inch," and it's already on a gun, it's a used barrel that you don't want to just cut off from the muzzle end.
Right.
Because
right.
you may
you
cut
don't
all
want to
that
cut them
choke
off
out.
from the muzzle end. Right. Yeah. You basically want to always take the breech end off because you'd be cutting it.
But then you got to rechamber, and you've got to go through all
Yep.
that other process. So.
Yep. Correct. Yeah.
So when you're ordering your rimfire barrels, make sure you're getting them from someone that has taper lap barrels and that they know what they're, because they are a little bit different on there. As Paul, sounds like the UPS guy's showing up at the door, got his dogs barking.
Yep. That's
right.
Everything's all delivery now because of the
Yes.
famous coronavirus.
Yeah,
so,
we're not talking about that today. We're corona free today. I've heard
Okay.
enough about
We're corona free today.
We've heard enough.
We're not sponsored by Corona.
No, we're not. All right. Anything else then that goes into on the barrel manufacturing side there that we haven't covered?
Not really. I mean, there's different, like you said, you have the button rifle barrels, you have cut rifle barrels, you also have like hammer forged barrels where they put a forge, so you take a mandrel it's a rifle that looks, opposite, you stick it down the barrel, and then it gets hammered on from the outside. That forms the rifling on the inside of the barrel.
Okay.
That's another way. Then you've got broaching, which is a big long broach. It's got little teeth on it, little hooks all over it, and then it just gets pulled once. So it's not like a regular cut rifle barrel where it's, all these different strokes. It gets pulled one time through the barrel, so it's broach, what they call broach cutting.
Okay. So that's like a medium between cut rifle
and button rifle.
Button.
Yeah, it's kind of something like that. But their broaches are very expensive, and again, typically you'd want different. Then you have to have a broach, then you have to have another broach in case a broach breaks or you need to have one. So let's say your broach gets dull, you have to send it back to be resharpened, and then you got to make sure you got another broach, so it can get expensive to be involved in the broach.
Yeah.
Okay.
To be broaching barrels. So.
All right, very good. Only other thing we haven't covered that we don't, just running out of time today, is one of these days we'll get you back on again and talk about all the different grooves and doing a 2-groove, 4-groove, 6-groove, 8-groove, and then the canted and the ratchet groove and all the various ones on those. But we'll go over that another time. Look forward to that. All right, very good. Appreciate you coming on today and covering that. Again, that's Paul Tolvstad with Killough Shooting Sports, going over his barrel knowledge. And thanks a lot, Paul. We will talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right, talk to you later.
Yep, bye.
All right, that wraps up Precision Shots, brought to you by Killough Shooting Sports there, and leads us into Bleeding Off with Joseph. No mics.
No mics
is today's topic, as we want to go over a little bit of USPSA type stuff, where Joseph has been going in and doing some training and going to matches. All right, what you got on no mics?
So it seems like it should be obvious that.
Now, what is a mic?
A mic is a miss.
Yeah,
and and it's pretty much all shooting related sports. They still use kind of like military terminology, to where, like, instead of just saying ABC, you say Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. Well, for a miss, or an M word, it's Mike.
Gotcha.
And so it's like, who is Mike? Well, Mike is a miss. Mike is not something you want to have, and it seems obvious if you're competitively shooting, and the whole point is to shoot accurately, you don't want to miss. Well, yes, but whenever you're trying to go as fast as possible, there are circumstances to where you have quick transitions or farther targets or hard covered targets versus easily visible targets to non easily visible targets. You have swingers, you have poppers and activators. I mean, there's all these different things that are designed to hinder your accuracy, so misses happen, mics happen. And so what I'm seeing that I'm having to do now is I've put all this effort in my movements with moving faster, more efficiently, not having any dead space or like gray areas to where I'm adding unnecessary positions or movements. Well, I'm having to regress that now to where the form is still there, but not necessarily the speed to make up for those accuracy changes, because since I'm now moving faster, even though it's more efficiently, it's still faster, and so I'm seeing a decline in my accuracy in my hits. And so it's kind of like, I've worked on my movements. Like my accuracy and my movements were both here. Probably my accuracy was a little higher, so I increased that. Well, now my shots on paper or steel, that's what's lacking, and so now I have to do that.
So you were accurate, but you were slower. So you tried to increase your speed, and in
Yep.
doing that, you
And
you
doing
made yourself
that,
less
you
accurate.
decrease your accuracy, yeah. And so it's kind of like a balancing act. In a perfect world, those would be level, but there's human error in there, and so it's very rarely level between your movements at which you can perform and your accuracy at which you can do at that speed.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm trying to work on now. And there's a lot of factors that go into it, as far as like how the stage is designed, how fast you are able to do it versus how fast you should do it. Just a lot of things. The way that the points are set up, the way that it's scored, it's really hard to calculate in your mind while you're doing it.
Right.
I mean, you can put it on paper and make it to where it makes sense and you can see what you should do, but sometimes whenever that buzzer clicks off, your mind goes blank and you just see paper and try to put holes in it.
Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
So to kind of explain to our non-USPSA shooters, you've got like a silhouette-looking target that you're shooting at. They have different zones on it to where you want to hit. The A zone is the center, and then they have a C zone, which is a little farther out, and then the D zone is out. So it's an alpha, a Charlie, or a Delta, or a Mike. And if you're a major power classification, the alphas get 5 points per hit, Charlies get 4 points, and Deltas get 2. If you have a minor power factor, which means less recoil because it's a softer shooting round, therefore should be easier theoretically, then you get 5 points for alpha, 3 points for Charlie, and 1 for Delta. So that's one of the reasons why you want to try to shoot major power factor, is because those misses don't hurt you as bad.
And basically with the way that they're scored between minor and major, all they're doing is rewarding people who are shooting more recoil.
Correct.
So the force at which those rounds are putting out is a lot higher than, like, say, regular 9mm Luger. Your recoil is very minimum, and they don't factor in, because if you look at your divisions, production can't have muzzle brakes or ports in the muzzle, stuff like that. Open guns can, but it's because you have to have that to offset the massive amount of recoil that you're having from these rounds. And so that's what they're rewarding, is even if you're shooting like a production Glock versus a 2011 STI, there may not look like there's much difference in recoil, but if you put those numbers on paper, what the differences in the power from the ammo is, it's like double. Like, I mean, it's exponentially larger. So that's all they're doing, is they're rewarding you for shooting a gun with more recoil, even though it kind of has all these other factors and items that also offset that, but you have to have those things, so it's kind of a wash. But that's all they're rewarding with that. Um, so
So basically, to win a stage, whoever has the highest hit factor, they call it, wins the stage. And the hit factor is your total points divided by the amount of time that it took you to do that.
mhm.
So 2 shots per target, for instance, and let's say you have a short stage that's 6 targets. Am I doing that correct? 6 targets is going to be 30
Yeah.
points.
So that'd be 2 shots per target, assuming that they're all paper.
Yes.
We're These numbers won't really reflect with steel because there's no penalties for missing steel. There could be potentially if you have like Virginia scoring and stuff like that, but we won't get into that. This is just normal Comstock scoring on paper because that's the best way to calculate it. So yeah, you would have 6 paper targets. So you have 2 shots on each, 5 shots per. Potentially, the max number of points for each shot is 5 points, and so that's how you get to that 30 points.
Okay. So 2 shots per target. We've got 6 targets. That's 60 points, isn't it? Am I doing this wrong?
It'd
Get my
be
math going.
yeah, that would be 60. This would have to be it would have to be 3
3 targets.
targets for 30 points.
Gotcha. Because 2 shots, maximum of 5.
Yeah,
We both
you
hit
got 10
alpha.
per paper. Yeah,
That's right. Okay. So, because one of my questions, he's slowing down to make sure he doesn't have any mics. Because what invariably happens to you, and it happened to me all the time, especially being new, and you come to these different stages, and you're trying to go and shoot fast, and then at the end you realize, oh shoot, I didn't even shoot that target, or you look at it and you went so fast you shot at it twice, but you only hit it once.
yeah.
So rules dictate you can go back and reshoot, but at what point is it detrimental to do that
Right.
by
Like,
tying up more
Is
time?
is it worth it or not worth it
Right.
for you to go back and try to make up those points?
So basically, if you do the math here, and we're kind of trying to do the extremes here. So if the maximum is 30 points, which is very short stage, and you do it in 4 seconds. So we're doing the hit factor. You do 30 points divided by 4 is 7.5. So your hit factor would be 7.5. And again, these are examples. I don't know if there's even a stage that has a minimum. I mean, to where your maximum would only be 30. That would be
There
a
are
very short
some
qualifier.
that are only 30 points available, but some of them are steel, and so you're not. There's other factors that go into that, like you're not penalized for your misses,
Right.
and so you can shoot, 20 times at these 3 targets and not really be penalized as long as you're doing it quickly,
Yes.
and you eventually hit them. But this is just an example, because we're using paper as an example, and then just using the numbers for the total number of points available plus your hit factor.
Okay, so if you have 30 maximum points and you get all 30, you got your alphas and you did it in 4 seconds, that's a hit factor of 7.5. But let's say you get to the end and you want to go back right quick and make sure that you shot 2 shots at every one,
Yep.
and you look back but you don't see all the holes in the paper, meaning you did it so fast that you blew one off.
Yep.
How should you go back and pick that back up?
On a short stage, it would probably be easier because your movement is probably going to be really minimum, and so you may have 2 or 3 total steps for your physical movement, and the targets are probably going to be only like 6 or 7 foot spans, apart, and so your movement to make that up may be this to here, which
Right,
is
just real quick.
which is almost nothing. And so then, in that circumstance, it would probably be beneficial as long as you realized it early.
Yes.
If you get to the end and you're like, you bring it back into your workspace and you're looking around and you've already spent 3 seconds and turned that 4 seconds into 8 seconds, it's not really going to help you at all then.
Right.
But if you realize that on that first target, there's only one hole in there and you're just now on the third target, then yeah, for sure, it's going to be in your best interest to go back and at least try to pick that up. I mean, you can shoot 3 rounds in there,
Right.
and as long as you get one that you're happy with, then it was worth it.
So we're talking a 4 or 5 second stage, and you spending maybe a max of a second and a half more than what we are going to do is try to pick that back up.
Yeah.
If it's 3 seconds down the road, then we're just letting it go.
Well, just as principle now, unless it's just a really long stage or has a lot of barriers that are gonna play a factor in me being able to get back to whatever position that I needed to make up, I'm probably gonna try and make up as most of those shots as I can now, just because I'm noticing how much either failure to shoot at, penalties, and mics are affecting my overall score.
Yes.
And so, regardless of what everybody else is shooting or the number of whatever the hit factor number is, I'm trying to increase my total number of points given in each match. And
Right.
so I'm probably going to, unless it's a short stage like this and just something goes terribly wrong and it's going to take me 2 seconds to make up one shot on a 4-second stage, then I'm probably not going to go for that. But in every other instance, I'm going to really try to make those up just to get my total number of points acquired up, because that's really where I'm noticing that I'm lacking.
Okay. So now that's one extremely short. Longest stage possible in USPSA is 32 shots.
Yep.
That's their maximum limit. So once you get into those, you have more time to play with that it makes a difference. Not a tremendous amount. So we're looking here, we're saying, just for example, if you have a maximum of 160 points on a stage, it takes 18 seconds. That's an 8.89. But if at some point you get in there and you realize that you didn't even engage a target, now's when the penalties really kick in.
A failure to shoot at penalty, I would 100% try to make that up. Regardless of what your hits end up being, I would really try to, unless it's some crazy position where you're like having to kneel down or get on the ground, something like that that's going to take you 5-10 seconds to do, I would really try to make all those up as possible. And that's not even taking into account your hits on that target. Just even if you've just shot next to it, into the berm, or just barely clip the target and you squeak by with a delta or something like that, that's better than having that penalty plus the mics. Even if you miss it twice, at least you don't have that penalty from it. You just have the misses.
So the example we used here, we did, let's say you get the maximum 160 and you did it in 18 seconds. That's an 8.89. If you failed to engage one particular target, that's going to drop you down from 160 to 120. And so from 120 in an 18-second same time frame, that means it's going to be a hit factor of 667. So if you get to the end and you realize this, and you go back and you pick up those other 40, you pick up those other points and get rid of the penalty, getting you back to 160 points, to get the same hit factor as if you had not shot them, you just quit.
Yep.
The 6.67, that's 24 seconds. So if you can do that in less than 6 seconds, you're going to increase your hit factor. If you do it in exactly 6 seconds, your hit factor stays the same. And if you do it longer than 6 seconds, well, it wasn't worth it.
Right.
You hurt yourself. So again, 160 points in 24 seconds is a 6.67 hit factor. If you didn't even engage a target, that's going to knock you down to 120. You would have to shoot it 6 seconds faster in 18 seconds to get the 6.67 hit factor.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a little more time on those longer stages with those more points allowed. Towards main thing is, as soon as you realize you messed up, get back over there and do it. Because if you can do it halfway through the stage and it only costs you an extra second and a half, then it'd be better than going all the way to the end, have to run all the way back to the beginning
Yeah,
if you forgot one of the first ones.
And hopefully you realize that you missed something quite a ways before you get to the end of the stage. I mean,
right.
Like I said, if you're sitting there and you're, looking around and about to unload your gun, and then you realize it, yeah, it's probably too late at that point. But there's also, there's a ton of other things that go into it as far as, if it's a short stage, and say one of them has a no shoot, covering it, some cover on it, and you hit that thing, then it's hard to justify going back to go for it. Because if you hit it again, then it's basically game over on that stage.
Right.
Because that's a lot of points that you just lost.
Yes.
Plus, in your mind, as you're shooting, you're like, well, okay, there's 20 points or 30 points, whatever it is right there. Do I really want to take another shot at this target, or should I just leave it where it's at, and hopefully I at least get 10 points from this 30, 40 point stage instead of 0.
Yes.
And that's, all these things are going through your mind. It's hard to process while you're doing it, and there's not like a surefire right answer on what you should do. So it kind of goes into your abilities. Like I said last time, whenever we were talking to Blake, I'm not at that point now where I know how long like my movements take.
Yes.
Like we saw yesterday. So when we did the drill, my draw was time to my first shot was like 1.7, and that was pretty consistent. We did the drill twice, and my time to first shot was the same on both, and my splits were also the same. So that's something that I can track. And so if I go and shoot a stage, and they show me the score, and my time to first shot is like 2.5 seconds, then I know that there was an issue. Regardless of if whenever I physically did it, I noticed a problem, they can show me those numbers, and then I visibly see that there was a problem with my draw, making it so much slower. And so then I can address it. Whenever you don't know those times, it's hard to see where you can make up ground, because like I can tell you, in high school how long it would take me to run like 100-meter dash. I can't tell you how long it takes me to run a stage that's 20 yards long from here to here while I'm shooting. I just haven't done enough examples of that for me to be able to tell. Once you shoot like 10, 15 stages that are all kind of set up the same way, then you can get an idea of how long it takes you to do a similar stage like that. But until you have all that experience, it's hard to say.
Yep. So point is practice, drill.
Yeah.
And as you get more experience, you'll become more acclimated to that, and you'll know your internal clock will be able to tell you whether to do it or not at this point. So what I'm going to do in my head is, if it's a quick stage and it's going to take me less than 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds, then I'm going to do it. If it's a longer stage, if it's less than 4 seconds, I think I can do it, then I'm going to do it. And honestly, until, like Joseph said, I get that internal clock, right now I'm probably just going to make them all up until I get used to it, and try to have it to where I do not have no penalties and no mics.
Yeah, and in a perfect world, you would balance your speed and accuracy to where at least enough, even if you're new, you'd have your self-awareness enough to balance those to where you don't miss targets or forget that they're there.
Yep.
Or move to where you can see them. But sometimes that doesn't always happen, and so that's where we get into this internal dilemma on, do I make it up? Is it even worth it? Am I even doing well enough to where it's going to matter? So all that kind of goes into it, and so that's at the point I'm at now that probably a lot of people are stuck in, to finding understanding your abilities and how long it takes you to do certain things that you're going to have to figure out in your head while you're shooting.
Yes.
So that's where I'm at now.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps it up for Bleeding Off with Joseph. Well, appreciate everybody tuning in today. Be sure and tune in 2 weeks We're going to go over cleaning and cleaning procedures, what we do with our rimfire barrels. We'll talk a little bit about what centerfire cleaning looks like, what we do at the range, at our Eley customer range here as far as cleaning and the protocols. We'll have Blake Lyles back on from 415 training to go over some more training stuff with Joseph and USPSA training, so be sure and tune in on that. Please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and follow our YouTube channel. Check out KSS and Eley on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, Joseph is PS Photog on Instagram, and mine is Shooting Accuracy. Thanks a lot. Have a good day, and we look forward to seeing you at the range.